White Sox GM Chris Getz is implementing a good policy, and let's discuss why that could go a long way towards sustained success next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Chicago Tribune columnist and longtime baseball reporter Paul Sullivan had a story yesterday going over how Chris Getz is implementing a novel concept. Don't pay these prospects until they actually perform at the big league level. And let's discuss why such a simple principle could go a long way toward the team sustaining success once they get there. Then the White Sox announced their spring training broadcast schedule. And let's discuss why they should have been broadcasting more games on the channel they own. Finally, it's Wayback Wednesday. I want to celebrate the career of 2005 World Series hero Bobby Jenks, who is now in the battle for his life. Okay, so there are a lot of reasons why the White Sox are in their current state of awfulness. And one of them was the previous leadership regime of Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn thought it would be a great idea to pay Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada, and Luis Robert Jr. before they had really done anything in the majors. The theory was at the time you buy out their ARB years with the ability to get maybe those extra club control years with the club options on the back end. And plus, if they're producing, you might actually save money compared to playing the arbitration game. But that backfired. Backfired big time because it was speculated that at least Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez stopped really working hard since they got their bag of money. They didn't really need to put in the extra effort to really keep themselves in shape. And in return, that led to them making, them not available because all the injuries just kept piling up. And in the case of like Eloy Jimenez, it pretty much in turn turned him into a ground ball hitter when he should have been a slugger because his legs were probably not underneath him, so he couldn't really drive the ball or lift it. And while it was a good way to have core pieces locked up for a while, since the owner is loath to give up a $100 million contract, it did actually sort of shrink the actual free agent dollars the White Sox had to spend in the free agent market. With the limited resources, got tied up then in the bullpen. It got tied up in, past his prime Dallas Keuchel. It got tied up in a terrible teammate in Yasmani Grandal. And basically there was nothing left to really address critical position gaps at second base or right field, or just sign that free agent that really finishes the rebuild. Your John Lester, your Jason Haywards. Even though Jason Hayward turned out to be terrible money for the Cubs too. But hey, he gave that impressive win one for the Gipper speech during that rain delay in 2016. But still, they never really finished the rebuild because Dallas Keuchel was not John Lester. Yasmani Grandal clearly was not your Jason Hayward. So that, really took away money from, because again, the Sox were always operating under a self-imposed salary cap. But fear not, because one of the fixes GM Chris Getz is bringing to the team is none of these emerging prospects are getting paid before they actually do something at the big leagues. Before you say, well, that's typical Jerry Reinsdorf economics right now. Remember, one reason Chris Sale and Jose Quintana fetched such a big prospect haul was they were on team-friendly contract extensions. The difference was they actually had accomplished something at the big leagues. Eloy, LRJ, did not. Moncada kind of at least accomplished something for one season. And also, if you say, well, again, Jerry doesn't want to pay anybody. Well, technically, he has no problem paying guys while they're under club control, buying out the ARB years, because it's the economics Jerry loves, because you're really not spending $100 million on a player. Because remember, the White Sox and the A's are the only two teams to not give out the going rate for good players, and that's $100 million. But the problem the Sox face and why this matters is paying Eloy and Moncada contributed to this current state. They were core pieces that never were available. They were usually hurt, and even if they tried to play hurt, they couldn't produce. And it just led to this decay of the roster. And Paul Sullivan shared that, this is not going to happen anymore, or at least most likely won't. This is what Paul Sullivan wrote in yesterday's Chicago Tribune. Jimenez and Robert were handed long-term contracts based on their potential and despite their upside. When Robert signed a 6-year, $50 million deal in 2020 with 2 options through 2027 that potentially made it an $88 million contract, former general manager Rick Hahn said that the Sox, quote, put our money where our mouth is in terms of our level of excitement about this player, end quote. No one complains as both look like stars in the making, but neither player lived up to his potential due to injuries and offensive struggles. Jimenez was dealt to Baltimore last summer and is now in Tampa Bay trying to make the team on a minor league deal. Robert needs to show he's healthy and improve this spring to increase his trade value. Getz said the Sox philosophy of betting on players' potential without seeing them perform in the majors has changed, at least for now. Potential stars like Noah Schultz, Kyle Teal, and Hagen Smith will have to wait to get a big payday. Quote, right now, with the pool of players we have, we'd like to see them perform at the major league level. Getz said, we're still open-minded, but at this point, I think it's wise to give these guys a little bit of a runway before we make a long-term commitment, end quote. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, and especially since some of these guys might just be high floor players. Like Kyle Teal, everybody's saying it should be a top 10 catcher in the big leagues. But they're saying, again, relative to catcher, a top 10 catcher might produce like a 260 average, 15 to 20 home runs, and provide better defensive metrics. But it's not like they're going to be an all-star player, 3-4 F4 guy. Schultz and Smith should be studs. They project to have very, very high ceilings. Braden Montgomery, high ceiling, big risk. Colson Montgomery could be Paul DeYoung, could be could be Corey Seager, somewhere in between. Edgar Carroll, I think he could be a stud, but again, could he just be another top 10 hitting catcher? But still, it makes a lot of sense because you don't want to be investing too much money in guys, these limited financial resources for guys like, Jairo Iriarte, who might just be a bullpen guy. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong. The White Sox need stars and they just need good players. They need value players. They need at least guys that hit, get to 2 F4. They need everything right now. And there is this assumption that the Sox will spend again. And that's the other reason why you kind of want to keep your powder dry and not have it totally tied up like it was tied up with Eloy and Moncada and Luis Robert Jr. This is what Getz said. Quote, track record shows he's been there to he's been there to provide financial support that's needed to take another step. End quote. When the rebuild turns a corner, the Sox payroll was at $193 million in 2022, ranked 7th in the majors. That's what Sullivan pointed out. Back to the quote, but first, we've got to worry about getting to that moment, end quote, Getz said. And that's the biggest thing right now. I don't think Rick Hahn really, he was very confident. Yes, you got 2021, and also they gave money to Tim Anderson. They paid him too, and rightfully so. But I don't think Hahn really had an idea of what motivates these guys. And I don't think he took into account that, okay, if I pay these guys, it's going to, Jerry's only going to give me so much money. I don't think he took that into account. I don't think he anticipated Jerry being like, I'm only giving you $200 million. Because I think that's what the payroll got to in 2021. But $193 million payroll actually should be enough to win the AL Central. The White Sox should, obviously they're in a build, as Keith Law pointed out on the Sox Machine podcast. But once they get it built, and hopefully they get it built, because again, you can be skeptical. They've earned the skepticism. They've earned every skepticism and criticism possible. But if they can get it built, they should just be like the Cubs and just act and bury your small market brethren in the Twins. Although if the Ishibas buy, they've got deep pockets. But the Twins, the Guardians, the Royals, the Tigers can technically spend too. But still, you should be outspending these guys. You should be outspending them in player development, in drafting, international scouting, international free agency, although it's pretty much everybody gets a pool. But anyways, but then, yes, when it comes to making upgrades to the roster and using free agency, you should be doing that. And $193 million payroll, though, might be enough to win the AL Central, but will it be enough, though, to get past the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox? And then eventually you got to get past the New York Mets or the Los Angeles Dodgers if you're dreaming of a World Series in 2033. Because you got to take into account, that's why this also makes a lot of sense, is the owner keeps putting self-imposed salary caps. So you have to be smart on who is your core and who gets the long-term dollars and who play the ARB game. And I think it's a good reason that you should have that policy, because I think the big thing that this regime has to figure out, where I just mentioned a little bit ago, I don't think Rick Hahn really had a good grasp of what motivates these guys. I had Ryan Johansson from Johansson Baseball, and he was a former Sox front office assistant in the player development. He said one key for a prospect to get to the big leagues and thrive is they want to be great. Do they have it in them to want to be great? But I do believe there's a difference between wanting to be great for status, fame, and money, and just wanting to be great because you love the game and you want to be the best version of yourself. And if it's a guy who wants status, fame, and money, then you got to play the ARB game. And then after the 6 years of club control, let some other sucker pay the big money and get robbed like the Angels did with Anthony Rendon. The Nationals played that well. And that's what you got to hope is, as Rendon leaves, he at least leaves with a World Series title behind him. Or obviously you can bring these guys back on shorter term, high ACV deals. So then they still technically have to keep earning their generational wealth, because some of these guys, that's what they're playing for. They're playing for the generational wealth. Anthony Rendon has even said, this is my job. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to play for money. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as it keeps you motivated to keep yourself in shape, continue to be the best version of yourself, that's what makes the difference. Once some of these guys get paid, they don't care. They don't want to keep themselves in shape. They don't want to prepare. They just want to show up, collect the paycheck, and go home. Now, if it is true, though, love of the game, the guy will continue to work, then give the contract to buy out the ARB years. But only after they have accomplished something, like Chris Sale, like Jose Quintana. And to be fair to Yoan Moncada, he did show a little bit something before his extension. I believe he signed his extension in the 2020 season. So, there was some evidence that, hey, this guy should be something more. So at least that. But Eloy and Luis Robert Jr., they gave that money before they even debuted. I believe, they did. And that's why too, with Moncada, it would not shock me if he actually has a good season with the Angels, because he has to prove he's worthy of making more money now in the big leagues. He's only on a $5 million deal or a $3 million deal. He's got to prove it now. He went from making $25 million all the way down. Although he got $5 million from the White Sox to get the heck up out of here. But the other reason why this is good policy is because you and I have no clue what the future economic landscape is going to be after the 2026 season. There's predictions of an apocalyptic lockout because the owners are going to want to force a salary cap. There is this feeling that it's going to be like what the NHL went through in 2005, where you're going to have the entire season canceled. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I do think we'll have a 2027 season, but I could see it being like 2020, where it's a very shortened season. And one of the reasons why I don't think it goes full out 2005 is because if the players union is smart, they disband. Because there's other precedents of this. They disband like the NFL Players Union did in 2011. You sue as individuals, and that forces the owners to stay at the table. And you can get injunctions and stuff like that. And yes, you play the legal game. And I know they did that in 1994, but they waited a little bit too late. And if you're the owners, you should have this retreat point. I know they want a hard cap, but you should have a retreat point to maybe go to an NBA model. Just don't have the stupid have salaries match up in trades, because then you're going to lose what some of these trades need to happen. Some teams are just that bad, or they, the roster has decayed that they need to get prospects. Some teams are just not good at drafting. It happens. But you have max years and max contract deals. And in return, though, you're going to have to give up some years on the club control clock. Because that's the only way. If the players, if I'm the players union, the only way I give up an inch is I want club control years knocked down from 6 to say even 3 or 4 years. But you don't want to tie yourself up into a contract that may clog up the payroll in the event you do have a hard salary cap. So right now it makes sense to have some financial flexibility, especially since the team's revenue resources, they're taking a big hit with CHSN not being on Comcast. And speaking of CHSN, the White Sox announced their broadcast schedule for spring training. CHSN, though, is only going to broadcast 7 of their over 30 exhibition games. So over the 30 White Sox exhibition games. And let's discuss why that should be more next on Locked On White Sox. Looking for a snack that's both nutritious and delicious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. And personally, like I said, I got a package right here. I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack. I got some, over the weekend. My wife and I were trying to eat more heart healthy. It's a great quick snack too. With the no shell options, I don't have to clean up around my desk. Man, it's got this great mix of roasted and salted too, where you're not like, feeling parched there. And I don't have to clean up my desk around with the no shell options. Obviously, if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein too, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. They are very tasty. I would say the no shell. I mean, if you like cracking pistachios, awesome. Me, just give me the guts, as they say. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. And these are good. Go on. I got the good mix there. So I know it's spring training games, and they're not the most fun games to watch, especially after like the third inning. 1 second. That one kind of went down the wrong, kind of got to help it get down the hole there. But when it comes to exhibition games, watching them on TV, I get they cannot be the most fun, especially again when, after the third inning, you're definitely getting into the non-roster guys with no hope of making the team. You're getting in those minor league invites, that type of stuff. And you're like, who are these guys? And some of these guys will never make it to the big leagues. But at least early in spring training, the White Sox do have some things that are worth watching. Like top prospect Noah Schultz, the best left-handed pitching prospect in all of baseball. He's expected to start, I believe, the February 26th game against the San Diego Padres. You also got Hagen Smith, last year's #1 pick, and the second best left-handed prospect expected to pitch at some point in spring training since they both got an invite to big league camp. Obviously, they're going to get eventually set down to minor league camp because the expectation is they're not going to debut with the team. They're going to give them another year to build up their arms. Probably going to be maybe their late season addition. Otherwise, they're definitely probably going to be on the team next year. But top hitting prospects, Colson Montgomery, Braden Montgomery, Edgar Carroll, and Kyle Teal, they're also in big league camp. Only Braden has no chance of making the 26-man roster because he's yet to play a professional game because, he had that ankle injury in the college super regionals. Didn't even play in the complex league. So we're actually going to get a chance to see him actually play in his first sort of professional game, hopefully. And it's still worth watching potential core pieces like Montgomery and Carroll and Teal and see if they can make the club. However, in terms of watching, you might as well book a trip to Arizona. And actually, hey, better weather. And I think right now in Chicago, I know where I am. We're still in the polar vortex. But you got better weather. And also the Sox do share a spring training facility with the Dodgers. So try to see if you can catch a Dodgers game too. Because the Sox announced CHSN, and remember, this is the RSN owner Jerry Reinsdorf co-owns with the Wirtz family, is only going to carry 7 games. For those watching on YouTube, I got the graphic up, but they're going to obviously broadcast, I believe, a lot more games on ESPN radio, but they're only broadcasting 7 games. And as former host of the show, Herb Lawrence, pointed out on Twitter, why not carry all of them? Since you own the station, this is at Eckner Wall 23. It's your channel. Televise all the spring training games. And again, why this matters too? Beyond the examples I just discussed, viewership has been terrible for CHSN when it comes to their game broadcasts. At least the Chicago Bulls, they're hurting. Josh Nelson of Sox Machine, he pulled this, or he retweeted this from Sean Hyken, that viewership is way, way down for the Bulls. minus 63%. I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. If you're listening via audio, basically that's the summary of it. The local viewership is way, way down for Chicago Bulls games. And a big reason for the viewership decline is the awful state of the Bulls, obviously, but also because CHSN is still not available on Comcast, the largest cable provider in the city. Still, this was supposed to be wrapped up in October when everybody was just mad that they couldn't get their Blackhawks games. And CHSN was saying, well, we're going to get on Comcast. Don't worry, we're going to get on. We made offers. Clearly, NBC does not care. They do not want to be in the RSN business anymore. And since the Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks still have not been able to get on Comcast to carry CHSN, that means 50% of the audience is without being able to watch their team, no matter the sad state. CHSN obviously is available over the air, but you still have that resistance to anyone wanting to use an antenna. I mean, for example, one of the reasons why my old man got rid of the antenna and got cable was to watch White Sox games because they were on cable, but also because he was tired of having to point his antenna in 15 different directions just to get ABC 7. So now these games are just limited to those in the Chicagoland area that are willing to use an antenna. And also the Bulls and Sox, they don't have the advantage that the Blackhawks have even. For example, the Blackhawks can tap into other out-of-town markets because they can claim certain out-of-town markets because of the more liberal home market rules. So, for example, I can get CHSN in Milwaukee with an antenna. And I did. I bought an antenna for like $11, and it gets a lot of stations in, actually. And I get a decent picture. But still, who wants to deal with that? Not many people do. And also, it's only applying to the Blackhawks because they can claim Milwaukee as their home market. I believe they can also claim like Indianapolis. They can claim a bunch, like Des Moines. But the local blackout rules in the NBA and MLB are much more stringent. And obviously, CHSN is available to direct-to-consumer, but it's $19.99 just for the Sox and $29.99 for all three teams. And they claim that to protect their partnership with DirecTV, who's also carrying CHSN. But here's the kicker why it would make sense to broadcast all your spring training games, because according to the press release, spring training games will be televised on CHSN and available for free to all viewers on CHSN.com, the CHSN app, and across premium providers, including DirecTV and DirecTV Stream. So even though this team's going to lose 100 games, the one thing the White Sox should be trying to sell is the kids can play in the hopes for better days. And hey, we do have it available for direct, stream. So take in this free preview of the app, and maybe you might want to say, you know what, I'll pay the $19.99 because it's almost like paying for a ticket. Because the White Sox are doing anything they can to draw you into, obviously, the ballpark, too, with their awesome ticket package for April and May games. But why not also do this? Because also, you've revamped your broadcast. You're going to add Brooke Fletcher as a sideline reporter and Connor McKnight as an additional reporter to explain all the data and concepts, all this data and analytics and concepts that maybe you can understand. You still have the great Steve Stone, and heck, why not give John Triffin, he's still there too, some more reps? And I'm sure there are those out there that would love to put this upcoming season on sim in 2026, and let's see where they're at in 2027. But this is just another example of the White Sox being so short-sighted because they own their own station. You can put these guys on wherever you want. I mean, do they have licensing agreements with these fishing shows that cannot be violated? Because right now, as WBBM's Rob Hart accurately tweeted out, CHSN is being broadcast to basically no one. And I got the tweet up at Rob Hart, WBBM. Put the game on channel 26 or the old channel 50 until Comcast comes around. I know Jerry lives in perpetual 1992 and needs the retransmission fees, but right now they have a cable channel that's broadcasting to an audience of none. And I do like this idea of a Trojan horse, and I wonder if CHSN could sublicense some games to WCIU channel 26 or channel 50, because those over-air stations are locally on Comcast, I believe. And usually Comcast still takes it in. And this goes back to my early hypothesis of what baseball teams should be doing with the regional broadcasts. The first one is too simple, and they won't do it. But that's revenue share, like the NFL or even the NCAA's Big Four conferences. Sell those. Team up with ESPN and Fox Sports, and then put the games on based on region. But that just makes too much sense. The other option is I would actually not have an RSN. I would just buy a station like Channel 26 and then zombie it, i.e., just run reruns and then just carry my games. boom, you get your carrier fees because usually those stations still get run on places like Comcast because, maybe they're a little bit lower, but your costs are super low. All you're doing is paying syndication fees. So maybe Comcast is more amicable to that. And hey, I like David Hahn and Ruthie Polinsky, but outside of the games, it's just those two doing Chicago sports shows basically, and Brooke Fletcher. Why do that when you can just zombie it? But again, it's a hypothesis that makes sense. And when did the Sox do anything that makes sense? Well, 2005 World Series hero Bobby Jenks needs your thoughts and prayers as he's battling stage 4 cancer. And I want to go over his recent interview with MLB.com Scott Merkin and also the great memories he provided on where he closed games for the Sox. And that's on today's Wayback Wednesday. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $7 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. And if you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote, they shop and you save. One of my favorite taglines. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. This show's available on all major podcast platforms. Well, life has not always been easy for Bobby Jenks, and some of it's self-inflicted with his well-documented addiction to painkillers and his issues with alcohol. He's admitted that, he's struggled with alcoholism and, addiction. But some of these problems Jenks has faced has not been by his own doing. Like when he said he had the game taken away from him, and that's what he put in the Players Tribune when he wrote about that after a botched back surgery in 2012, where he eventually reached a $5.1 million settlement. But the challenges Jenks is facing now is just tremendous. But he's taking it on, like getting the final 3 outs in Game 4 of the 2005 World Series to snap that 88-year championship drought. Jenks revealed to MLB White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin the other day that he's battling stage 4 stomach cancer. Making matters worse, he lost all his possessions in his home in the Palisades fire. So you're just like, man, how much more can this guy take on? Now, he is getting treatment in Portugal, where his wife is from, and he's not backing down, much like he didn't back down from Orlando Palmeiro with 2 outs, man on second, and a 1-0 game in Game 4. And this is what he said, quote, "Now it's time to do what I got to do to get myself better and get myself more time." However you want to look at it, Jenks said. "I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to die in Portugal. I'm not going to die here in Portugal. They're not going to put any numbers on it. I wouldn't even want numbers. You hear stories all the time. Oh, they gave me 6 months 25 years ago. I don't buy into that. Whatever happens is going to happen regardless," end quote. And Merkin detailed his treatment, and it just sounds rough. According to Jenks, it has spread all over his stomach lining, into his bones, into his lower back, and his hips. He's also dealt with an instance where the tumor blew up, bleeding into his stomach and causing severe digestive problems. To get the bleeding under control, Jenks is going through a second round of 10 sessions of radiation. Friday was day 7, and there are 3 more scheduled for next week. The goal is to shrink the tumor as much as possible to dry it out and kind of cauterize the bleeding before they discuss a next step. Being on blood thinners since October because of the pulmonary embolisms in his lung, the bleeding could start again from anywhere. So again, thoughts and prayers to Bobby Jenks and his family. And honestly, this is a guy that you can point to for providing some of the best moments of being a Sox fan. So, I hope all of White Sox Nation, I know the Sox sent out a great tweet, all that stuff, really support Bobby and his family during this trying time. Because think about all the great memories he gives you. Game 1, that World Series save. Ozzie calling for him. He wants the big guy. Yeah, obviously it hurt to see him blow the Game 2 save, but hey, Scotty Pasetnik came to the rescue. But Game 4, where the rookie, Jenks, comes up big, getting those 3 biggest outs in White Sox history. Palmeiro over the head of Jenks. Uribe charges, throws out, and the White Sox have won the World Series. I'll never forget Joe Buck's call of that. And you and I should also just never forget just how good of a closer he was with the White Sox after 2005. He saved 173 games for the Sox and was a two-time All-Star. You know, he did retire 41 consecutive batters in 2007, and that matched the record for a reliever. And I always got jacked up whenever I would go to a game. Ninth inning, the Sox have a lead, and you hear, "Here comes the boom." Because I think that's what his entrance was. Boom, here comes the boom. I think that's what it was. So a guy who, finally gets his life back on track, to have this happen to him, you just feel for him. So thoughts and prayers to Bobby Jenks' family. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout spring training. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow to discuss the early goings of spring training with Chicago Tribune Sox beat writer Lamond Pope. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the White Sox front office making the right call to not reward prospects with a big contract until they prove something, the Sox needing to broadcast all their spring training games, and the Wayback Wednesday segment focusing on Bobby Jenks, the great memories he provided, and now him being in the fight of his life. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.